He's a victim. He's a crybaby. He's.
Are you trying to start me and Nick Diaz?
I don't give a shit what Ariel Helwani thinks.
Fair enough.
Who the fuck is Ariel Helwani to question anything?
You're an instigator. Are you trying to instigate?
How Ariel Helwani rose to the top despite the drama. Ariel Helwani is perhaps the most well-known journalist in the MMA sphere, and there are plenty of good reasons for it. But along the way, he developed a reputation for stirring the pot with his questions. This earned him the enmity and rage of industry giants like UFC president Dana White and managers like Ali Abdelaziz. Leave the promoters, even the fighters themselves have had public beefs with Ariel due to his tendency to try and instigate them with his pointy questions. This has, ironically, led to Helwani having feuds with several fighters for one reason or another, and this list will only grow as we start the MMA action in 2025. There have been countless examples of UFC shows where, due to his reporting of events, he overshadowed the whole brand and sometimes even the sport. So how come a mere journalist takes center stage every time when some mega show is happening? Let's explore how a kid from Montreal, Quebec, Canada became so big that he can challenge the might of even the biggest of the biggest in the game. Let's cut straight to UFC 199, a great night of fights that was spoiled by a petty media banning. For starters, you remember Left Hook Larry shocking the world when he knocked out the champ Luke Rockhold. The striking image on the day was that of Michael Bisping wearing the UFC middleweight title, grinning like he's won the lottery. Nobody saw this one coming. The whole event went from mildly surprising to literally unbelievable. But then, just when you thought it couldn't get crazier, the UFC pulled the rug out from under everyone by announcing the highly anticipated Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor rematch, as well as the return of the beast in carnage, Brock Lesnar. Yes, Brock friggin' Lesnar back to MMA, but many of the hardcore fans knew that. How could that be when the UFC announced it before the main event of UFC 199? Somebody beat them to the punch and reported it ahead of their big reveal. This was the point where all the ruckus started. In the eyes of Dana White and the Fertitta brothers, it was a cardinal sin. That somebody was Ariel Helwani reporting for MMA fighting. The result? The UFC decided to escort Ariel from the event, yanked his credentials, and apparently told him he was banned for life. Talk about a slap in the face. This was being done for apparently doing their job. While the media members were hyped to write and talk about Bisping's spectacular victory or talk about this fantastic night of action, they were all reporting about one man they called a colleague, Ariel Helwani.
Right before the main event, a member of the UFC PR staff came to me and said that Dana White wants to speak to you. Michael Bisping was about to fight Luke Rockhold, so we go to the back. Dana White is there, some other members of his team are there, and he just says to me, "You're out. Get out of here. You're done. We don't want you here anymore. Go to Bellator."
Zuffa top dogs were pissed. How could someone else have control over their narrative? They already had heat with Helwani due to his persistent questions related to fighter pay and him engaging with Bellator fighters. Helwani didn't leak any secrets, he didn't steal any info, he just reported it before the UFC had their big moment. That's the power of journalism, it rattles the biggest of the big. As a result, it wasn't just his peers in the MMA landscape, he'd managed to get the entire sports world's attention without even throwing a punch. Thankfully, cooler heads prevailed and Helwani's credentials were restored within a week. However, the bridges were burnt at that point. The Canadian was by far the biggest enemy of the company. Before all the drama, the pair shared a healthy working relationship. Dana and the whole Zuffa brass once tried to benefit from Ariel, who was the #1 MMA reporter since the mid-2000s and had the backing of the hardcore fans.
Is WEC merging with the UFC?
Yes.
Dana once went out of his way to make sure Ariel got the first scoop when he flew him all the way from New York to Las Vegas to break the news of the purchase of Strikeforce.
UFC has purchased Strikeforce. Is that true?
That is true.
This was done intentionally since Dana and the UFC themselves wanted to be the first ones to announce this thing before any media outlets could do it. Those were the days, but not anymore. He was shunned in favor of other friendly journalists who could toe the line set by the UFC. Ariel's hard-hitting, no-holds-barred style of questioning started rubbing Dana and the UFC bigwigs the wrong way. Dana didn't like it and wrote him off as too negative in his reporting.
Did Dana White run you out of ESPN?
So I can't answer that question with yes or no.
Now, Dana White never misses a beat to hit back and slander Ariel. In fact, Dana's had plenty of colorful things to say about him over the years.
He's a victim. He's a crybaby. He's
Dana being the boss of the UFC comes with some privilege, and hardly anyone counters him for that. But there are times he's held back for his name-calling of Helwani. In 2021, Gina Carano was fired from the Star Wars franchise for posting a meme analogizing Republican politics to the Holocaust. Obviously, being a proud Jew, Ariel had to jump in and call it out. Dana White came out to defend Gina, but inadvertently blasted Ariel, labeling him such a douche.
I love how Ariel Helwani made it all about him. It was all about him. Such a douche.
Ariel let this one slide, but not his colleagues at ESPN. Some even bashed the UFC president for his name-calling of Helwani. ESPN tried to stay silent until public pressure forced the network to release a statement backing the Canadian. Ariel is a valued colleague and an exceptional MMA reporter. His record speaks for itself. The UFC brass, however hard they tried, couldn't seriously impact his popularity and influence. But the grudge that has had more career impact is one that is still ongoing, with Ali Abdelaziz, the head of Dominance MMA. Dominance manages some of the most high-profile fighters in the UFC, like Justin Gaethje, Kamaru Usman, and Henry Cejudo, among many others. He boasts an elite stable of the Dagestani contingent, including the likes of Islam Makhachev, but he's also known for being one of the most polarizing figures in the sport. Ali has been accused of trying to silence the media, especially when they ask tough or critical questions about his clients or business practices.
I was told, quote, I was told not to do interviews with you anymore.
Ever wondered why Helwani doesn't seem to interview fighters from Dominance MMA? I think you know very well the reason. Probably the only prominent fighter with Ali to do interviews with him is Kayla Harrison. Ariel and Ali share Egyptian backgrounds. It would make sense for Helwani and Abdelaziz to find common ground, but the two have had their fair share of disagreements. Surprisingly for the whole MMA world, he once mended with him and went on for a debate on the MMA Hour. Ali tried to defend some of his more controversial actions. Honestly, Ariel verbally brutalized him in there, pulling up a 10-7 on him, and that was the last day we ever saw Ali on his show.
You're acting like a bully. You are. And you're getting too emotional, and you're trying to intimidate people, and you're trying to intimidate the media. You are, and you can't do that. That's not your job.
And that was the end of that chapter. Now let's head over to the podcasting king, Joe Rogan. He's got his podcast. He's the voice of UFC commentary, and probably one of the most well-known MMA personalities of all time. Rogan and Ariel haven't had a public feud like Dana, but there's a lot of tension between the two. Joe has previously insinuated that Ariel sometimes tries to push fighters into saying scandalous things on his podcast.
To which Rogan said that you like to make people say certain things. Well, what are we talking about? Ariel Helwani likes to get people to say things. I ask questions, people answer them. I move on.
The next Monday after the UFC 199 debacle, Joe put out a narrative that he felt led to the banning of Ariel. According to him, the UFC had warned Ariel not to break the Brock Lesnar news, or else they'd fire people connected to his sources.
The UFC perspective was that don't do this, because if you do this, there's only a handful of people that know this information. So we're going to fire everybody. See, here's the thing about this leaking information. People say, he's just doing his job reporting. I get that. I understand that. But you have to realize all you're doing, if you're scooping it, is you're shining the attention on yourself.
But honestly, it felt like the words were coming from the mouth of Dana White. It felt just like the UFC's version of the story that they wanted out there to make it seem that Ariel did something wrong. Ariel, of course, wasn't too happy about Rogan's take. He called out Rogan for spreading a version of events that he believed was a complete fabrication, a version that ultimately hurt his reputation.
At my lowest, he spread lies about me. At my lowest, right? 2016 UFC 199. So, I don't give a fuck. That's something I'll never forget. It was a complete, total lie. And I never got an apology for that.
For Ariel, it felt like Rogan was just parroting the UFC side of the story to set up false narratives, which only made things worse. Rogan's commentary on this perhaps really illustrates just how closely tied to the UFC he is. Now, beefing with promoters and pundits is one thing, but to have beef with retired or current fighters is something that feels unnecessary for Ariel. Several high-profile fighters have had beefs with Ariel for one reason or another. Some of them include Paddy Pimblett, Jamal Hill, and Brendan Schaub, to name a few.
And I said to Brendan, who I've never had an issue with, despite all the shots, I said, cool. If you're going to apologize to me privately, I hope you're also going to do so publicly.
Ever since Ariel left ESPN back in mid-2021, he hasn't stayed silent on anyone who dares slander him. Ariel believes enough is enough. He has had way too many people take shots at him for only doing his job. He never used to fire back previously, but not anymore.
If I'm being honest, I've been sitting back for the past 18 months, and I've seen a lot of people take shots at Helwani, and if I'm being honest, I was told time and again not to punch back. Well, guess what? I'm punching back. And I'm not sitting back and letting anyone talk shit about me anymore because I'm tired of it.
Since leaving ESPN, Independent Helwani went back and relaunched his flagship MMA Hour show on MMA fighting. The first scalp after his ESPN departure was Brendan Schaub. He smack-talked the fighter-turned-pundit for spreading lies about the UFC 199 drama and his image in particular. It dragged on for almost a month and ended only when Schaub publicly apologized for the lies he said about Helwani. Since then, there have been multiple back and forths with anyone auto-amputating to malign his image.
He uses fighters for clicks, uses fighters to make money.
It's lie after lie after lie after lie.
His MMA Hour show pulled in a bigger audience than any of the shows he did on ESPN, proving that his loyal fan base was still very much with him. Now that he has steered in his next venture called Uncrowned in collaboration with Yahoo Sports, we hope he continues to do justice to the game with his journalism and reporting.
The new era, the empire, the uncrowned era.
Ariel's approach to journalism has been a game changer for MMA. No other journalist was asking Dana hard questions while simultaneously always being a credible source for the sport. He's done more to expose the inner workings of the sport than almost anyone else, and despite all the drama, he's remained the same. Even though some big players in MMA don't like Ariel, he still goes strong. While they may argue that he instigates or asks dumb questions, which is sometimes true, but the question should be, is that a bad intention? So yeah, Ariel's polarizing, but he's also helped push MMA into the mainstream, given fighters a platform, and made the UFC sweat a little bit. His independence is what makes him unique in a world full of corporate agendas. He might not replicate his idol, Howard Cosell. Maybe he is the Howard Stern of MMA. Yeah, maybe. But he's Ariel Helwani for sure, more than just a character in the game, but definitely a man of character. So, ladies and gentlemen, what do you think of Ariel and all the stuff surrounding him? How do you rate him as a journalist? Do you think he does prod the fighters? We await your comments, so don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications.